Hi everyone, welcome back to That's So Random. I'm Erin, and today is the first Saturday of March, and which means March is the month that has St. Patrick's Day, and I figured do a St. Patrick's Day look. And I'm gonna do it on Belle. Not that one. This one. And so I'm gonna do that look. And if you watched this video from last July, you would know that I had bought some green bed sheets when I had gone thrifting, and they're 100% polyester, and I'm going to dye those and get the colors I need for this dress. So yeah, let's get into this. I'm hoping that it's not super long. I'm definitely trying something different for how I create this video. I'm trying not to show every little thing, but just kind of show like details of like what needs to be done. So let's get into this video. So I have these sheets, king size sheets. So because they're big, but I'm not sure how much fabric I'm gonna need, I'm gonna cut out everything and sew it together first before I actually dye it. Yes, this all has been washed. It's microfiber, which microfiber is a lot of polyester and nylon, and normal dye will not work on this. I actually have to get a poly dye, so that's also why I'm going to sew this together. So when I get my poly dye, I can just dye the pieces that need to be dyed in the colors that need to be dyed. Because there's three greens. There's the green for the sleeve and the skirt, a green for the bodice, and then for the trim and this part of the sleeve. So you know, they all have their special colors, so I want to sew this together and make sure I have enough fabric for everything, because I really want a nice fuller skirt, but I don't want to lose for the bias that's going to have to go at the bottom of the skirt, and I don't want to lose for the bias that has to go here and the bias that has to go underneath, because it's going to be a two-piece. I'm going to have the top and then the skirt underneath it. And then I remove the elastic from the fitted sheet, and I'm going to actually use the elastic for when I do the puff sleeves here and for the waistband for the skirt. So let's get into stitching this together. So I had to make bias strips because if you look at Belle's dress, there are a lot of trim, and I figured it should be in bias. So the video I used to make continuous bias is linked down below. So for the skirt, I just measured out the waist measurement that I wanted at the top, you know, close to the camera and then far away from the camera, to cut out 6 panels, and just folded this in like 4 sections and just cut it to be the it was longer than what I needed, but just to have it be the waist measurement, which was still too small, so I actually had to take from there. So sewing all the pieces together to make the full circle of the skirt. Also, not caring the fact that nothing's really even, I made the top more even than I did the bottom. I did do the skirt in a French seam, so I wouldn't have to finish the seams. So this is the wrong sides together, which actually is a lot shinier than the right side. Because the sides were cut on a slight bias, I hung it to let those all stretch out and be uneven, so I can cut them later and make them more even. The puff sleeve, I do have a link down below of what I used. I did not create this right. I actually had to add gores in later, so they're a little small. They could have been bigger. The lower sleeve is just the lower half of a jacket pattern I have that I just sewed up the side seam to create the lower half. Now the corset, so with the corset, here's my finished pattern of the corset with all the right measurements after the testing that I had already done on the previous one. I also did cut out a lining that you will see later. So sewing all the pieces together, following the pattern or the pieces that needed to go next to each other, I did already add seam allowance to the pattern, so I'm just following that seam allowance, creating these seams. So for dyeing, this is the lighter of the colors that I need to dye. These are the medium colors. Medium set that needs to be dyed a little bit darker, and then the corset needs to be dyed super dark of a green. And I'm sewing everything together after they've been dyed. So here is the puff sleeve gonna be sewed on to the lower sleeve, being pinned together, right sides together, and stitched. And yes, like I said, could have been bigger for the puff. Here is the lining with the twill tape, and I have pinned the top of the corset and the sides to put them together, and now I'm sewing them in the center of all the seams to help create the boning channels on the seams. And now after all those have been done, I start sticking in the bones for the boning and stick those with a zipper foot to guide along that to create the channel, and also to kind of keep them in so I didn't have to keep pulling them out and putting them back in. After all the bones have been put in, I start taking that bias tape that I made, bias strips, and sewed them to the top of the corset and also for the bottom. And here I am putting all the placements of for the eyelets. Taking all the tools needed for creating an eyelet, just kind of poking a hole, kind of snipping as small as I can to get it open just enough to put the eyelet through. But the one thing I didn't do is I definitely did not put any interfacing like I should have. So I had to stitch them in later. But it was also kind of nice to stitch them in later because then I got more of a covered eyelet that looks a little bit nicer than the silver. Here's the skirt, all those links and links of bias strip to be put on, and here's the final review. Hope you liked this video of me creating the green Belle dress. If you liked it, go ahead and hit like. If you want to see more content from me, go ahead and hit subscribe.